Welcome to Realtor Therapy with Steph and Kel.
We're your hosts, Stefanie Campbell and Kelly Dugan, top producing agents with the Gold Group at Properties Christie's International.
With over $200 million in sales, we've seen it all. The wins, the losses, and the downright insane moments that come with being a realtor.
This podcast is your no BS, unfiltered look into the world of real estate.
Whether you're an agent needing a therapy session or looking to level up your game, we've got real stories, real problems, and real talk.
And hey, if you're a client, stick around. You might just pick up a few trade secrets.
Let's get into it. Welcome
Hey,
to
guys.
Realtor Therapy. We have
I
a
know.
guest on the podcast today.
I know, this is our first guest with our new name.
Yes. Our second guest total.
Second guest total.
All right, I'll do a drum roll. You want an intro, Stephanie?
Drum roll. Oh, am I doing? Okay. Hello. Okay.
Are you going to introduce Mike?
You're doing great, guys. You're doing great. This is awesome.
Mike McNamara.
Hey, what's
in
up?
the house.
How's it going?
Mike is
With proper rate.
Yes, mortgage lender with proper rate. And we have been wanting to get him on here for a while just to chit chat about, we're going to try and actually make talking about mortgages as fun as we possibly can. But I do feel like there's quite the hype about. I feel like rates have been.
This is actually a very exciting topic because rates are on.
They've been on the
forefront.
buzz for since 2020 when it all started, when the craziness started. I feel like everyone always wants to talk about rates.
Yeah.
By the way, there's no one that wants to geek out with me about mortgages than you guys. So I really need this therapy.
Yes,
Okay,
this
we're
could be
good.
therapy for you too.
I know. That's amazing.
So where are rates even at right now? Let's first start there.
Generally speaking, interest rates are dependent on credit scores and the loan size and all these different variables. There's probably about 10 of them. And so generally, I'd say they're about 7% right now, give or take, depending on each customer and their particular circumstances. But that's a little higher than I think what people would like to see right now. But yeah, that's
Are
about
you
it.
surprised they're still this high? Like, were you expecting them to drop like everyone was saying last year?
Actually, I wasn't. And the reason I wasn't is that I saw, thank you. I saw that inflation is still elevated. Like, look at our prices of everything.
I know.
Our prices of things are still really high. And until our prices come down, we're still going to see elevated interest rates. I honestly think this is our new norm
You think 7 is the new norm?
for a while.
For like a year, you think? I hope, yeah. Hope
Kelly
you
and I
brought your crystal ball.
I know. I was joking with Kelly before he got here. I'm like, I'm going to open with, I hope you brought your crystal ball today.
Yeah, because this is our disclaimer. Obviously, guys, we have no idea what's going to happen. This is us just talking about what we think and,
How
that
we
kind of
feel.
thing. How we feel.
We pick up on the vibes.
We pick up on the
the
vibes.
vibes of the market.
All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah. Look, I read the data just like you guys probably read the news articles and all that stuff. And I look at all the economic releases every day that when they come out. And the strength in the economy is undeniable, right? And when there's strength in the economy, the Federal Reserve does not have an incentive to lower the interest rates, especially because we have inflation and it's about 2.9%. And their goal is to get it down to 2%. So we have a robust labor market and we have a robust wages just went up on average 10 cents an hour. It's undeniable. The data is there. And as a result, there's no incentive for the Federal Reserve to lower rates. Not now, probably about a year.
Okay. So
we'll
is this
say our prayers?
Is it like a myth? Because I also see these things online too that, Trump is, ordering rates to come down or this and that. Like, does he have any say? Is there any truth to that?
He would like to have a lot of say. He would like to control that as much as he can. The answer is no. He has the Federal Reserve has the control over that. So the Federal Reserve is independent of the president, and the president can't come in and just bully the Federal Reserve into manipulating interest rates.
Okay.
But here's how it works. The Federal Reserve has two main tasks. They call them mandates, two requirements. The Federal Reserve's job is to maximize employment, right? The most people working in the population that we possibly can. And the second thing they're required to do is to control or stabilize prices, inflation, right? And so those two things often are at odds with each other. And so the only tool that the Federal Reserve has to adjust those two things are interest rates. So if you lower the rates to stimulate the economy, well, then prices go up.
Right.
Then you have to raise the rates to slow the economy down to bring prices back down.
Wow.
So it's a constant teeter-totter for the Federal Reserve to manipulate interest rates to adjust to get the economy in the right balance.
Well, and that makes
makes
total
sense.
sense because, I mean, we say all the time, we're like, oh, God, can you imagine when rates come down, how much of a frenzy it's going to be?
Oh, my gosh.
Like,
yeah.
I'm actually kind of scared for when they do lower rates, what's going to happen, you know, as far as the buyer's market and how crazy it's going to be. And
I feel like it'll trickle though. I mean, when it was COVID, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like COVID, they did like it was a pretty quick jump, right? From 4 or 5% to like, I mean, we saw 2s. So that was just so quick. So I feel like that caused, so I'm curious to see this time around when they come down, if it'll be a trickle or if it'll be kind of, you know, quick like it was with COVID. But yeah, it's going to definitely be crazy because
my preference is slow and stable. Like when interest rates jump up or down, really, the market freezes. People are uncertain about what's going to happen, even if it's in their favor. So when interest rates are coming down, a lot of people say, oh, I think I'm going to wait.
See if they'll come down more.
Yeah.
oh, that's so funny.
It's a really interesting study of the psychology behind that. But actually, any kind of movement or instability, people freeze. They sit on the sidelines.
Isn't that so? I mean, even we saw it with the election. It's like so funny. And I mean, it's the same with every single election. But just that one question mark about who's going to be next, it never matters. I mean, we read a lot of data on this. It never matters who gets elected, red or blue.
Right.
But, that after the election is over, there's always an uptick in the market because it takes away that big question mark in people's mind.
Yep. Once people understand and can expect or anticipate what's going to happen, they'll start making their adjustments in their life. You know, I'm ready to move on. I feel like I can count on some stability or consistency with this, and therefore now I'm ready to do the next thing in my life.
What do you say for buyers that are, let's say they're sitting on the sidelines and they're waiting for these interest rates to go down? Like they're saying to me, oh, that really affects my affordability. I'm just going to wait. What do you think that's smart to wait? Do you think that they shouldn't wait? What kind of advice do you usually give?
My advice is typically the same no matter what the market's doing, and it's always better to buy now because the longer you sit out of the market, the more you're giving away to a landlord. So, for example, if you're paying $2,500 a month to a landlord and you decide, oh, I need to save more money or I want to wait till rates come down or home prices come down or whatever you're waiting for, but in reality, what you're doing is you're giving away money to a landlord when you continue to rent because the value of the home is going up. And so it will cost more typically each year, even though home values will obviously go up and they come down. All the while, they're going up at a pace of about 3 to 4% a year. And there's a lot of data out there that supports that, by the way. I'm not just making those numbers up. Like the federal government has a website out there, and you can see what home values have done since 1971. You can also go to there's a professor at Yale, his name is Robert Schiller, and he makes all of his smart Yale students do all the data for him, and he's got spreadsheets all over his website, and he shows 100 years worth of home data and that values of homes go up by over 4% a year. So the government website, Robert Schiller, and Robert Schiller, by the way, is also well known in the financial markets because there's an index you've heard of called the Case-Shiller Home Price Index. That's Robert Schiller.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Right?
This is really good. I hope you guys are taking notes, or not while you're driving. This is really good. We need to have
great info.
Detailed show notes on this one.
Yeah.
So you can look up his data. When you have a client that's on the fence, I refer my clients to Robert Schiller's data and his website. It's all there, and it's really amazing information. But the bottom line is, if you have someone who's debating whether to wait or not, I always say, it doesn't make sense to wait. Here's the math. I don't try to convince anybody to do anything. I just show them the math. That's
right.
And home prices is something you and I can attest to going up. Like even just, I've been in the business for 5 years. Okay. So it's not that long in comparison to, the housing market, but even just, I sold my, my client's townhome that they had bought with me, like right when I got in to the business. And I don't remember the price. well, it was like 2 something, but it was just so crazy because I went back to that sale on the MLS and I'm like, gosh, you couldn't touch one of those over there for this price now. But at that time, I remember thinking like, oh, wow, like this is, I think it was multiple offers. It went up a little bit. So I was, you know, of course, when your clients are going above asking price, especially when I was newer, you know, you're like, oh, you don't want them to overpay for anything and then it was 5 years later and I'm like, you couldn't touch anything over there for $249 or whatever they bought it for. Like, you know what I mean? And I'm like, that just again reiterated, like they really like home prices are just going up.
I know. And I guess it's the same with the stock market. Every financial advisor out there will tell you it costs you money to sit on the sidelines over the course. I mean, you have to be committed to the long-term play. Like I have all these buyers and things or sellers trying to time the market.
Yeah.
And it's like,
works.
you can't time the market. I mean, I had somebody recently, they were, again, you know, obviously you can strategically, you know, it's probably better to list for sale now than it is, you know, at Thanksgiving.
Right.
But some of it's common sense. But it's amazing to me the amount of people that are so focused on making the right decision that it's like analysis paralysis. It keeps them from making a decision.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
You know? It's crazy. Another thing I was going to ask, and sorry, I'm like just going rogue.
No,
here.
let's go
But,
rogue. I'll read roguing out today.
I'll read your questions later. That we kind of talked about this briefly, but I have a lot of clients that say to me, well, I was approved for this, but I think that I actually feel much more comfortable paying an amount lower than that.
Yeah, tell us how do you arrive at that pre-approval magic number? Like, oh, I was pre-approved for $600,000, or you know, how do you guys arrive there?
Yeah.
So we look at the 3 pillars in mortgage lending, and that is income, assets, and credit, right? And those 3 data points tell us what the customer qualifies for. But in reality, what they are comfortable with is a totally different thing often, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm in the habit of asking the client, hey, what are you comfortable with paying on a monthly basis? Mm-hmm. What's your actual comfort zone? And does that monthly payment allow you to continue to save for retirement along the way? Mm-hmm. And once I bring that up, they realize I'm not just trying to push them into a higher payment and spend more money. I want them to actually make a smart choice for themselves and still save along the way. And then I say, okay, cool. What happens when your fabulous realtor finds you the perfect place? Are you still going to stick to that monthly payment you just told me about, your comfort zone? Or are you going to let yourself go a little higher if it hits everything on your want list? So I try to get them to focus on their budget, what they can actually afford, and what allows them to still save along the way, because that's really important. Now, when they ask me, well, and this is what happens almost every time, they'll say, oh, that's great. And then we identify those 2 price points. And by the way, then I reverse the calculations and say, okay, if you want your payment to be this much or this much, this is what it equates to in terms of dollar amount for your purchase price.
Right.
And then at the end, when they realize they didn't ask me, they go, well, wait a minute, how much do I actually qualify for? And you're like, that's a good question. You actually qualify for a lot more.
Right.
But if your comfort zone is here, you should be true to yourself and stick within that guardrail.
Right.
Right. I like that.
And I will say, I think a lot of people push themselves, especially in this market. And I'm sure we're going to enter into another arena of more multiple offers here too, with spring on the horizon. I think it's very important for buyers to try to shop below their max budget.
Oh, yeah. Give yourself room to compete. I tell my clients that, when they're shopping at their tip-top budget and a property just goes on the market, and I just usually know just by seeing it if it's going to have multiples or not, I'm like, just be wary when you're shopping at that tip-top price point. You don't have room to really go over asking price or do kind of all the bells and whistles that it would take to essentially get it if you do compete.
And I always tell people too, I'd rather you buy something cheaper and put equity into it over the long term. Like, buy that ugly kitchen, buy that ugly bathroom.
Yes,
you know what
totally.
I mean? Get those terrible floors. Because then when you go to sell too, that's all equity that you're selling. Like it from a resale point, it just makes a much more joyous experience knowing that the client put that much equity into their home.
Totally.
But,
it's obviously important to all of us for the client not to have buyer's remorse.
Right.
So let's put them in the best position to do well in their real estate investment. And so, we want them to look at the math behind all of this and be realistic.
Right. So what does it look like when a client calls you and they're like, hey, I'm looking to get pre-approved? One pushback I always get, which you can confirm or deny, whenever I tell clients, call a lender, that kind of start there type thing. Oh, well, I don't want them to run my credit. Oh, I don't want to talk to a lender just yet.
yeah.
Like, it's so like they're like scared to.
And
then
that
I'm
is
like,
funny.
why? It's a
like
conversation.
They drag their feet so much on calling the lender.
Yes.
Like, it's like, oh, this uphill battle. I'm like, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah,
Big
like,
scary
I have to
lenders.
get, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like I have to get
Monsters.
all these documents and send them over. It's like, okay, do you want to move? I mean,
Right. Yeah, I mean, we do what we call a soft pull, which means it doesn't cause an inquiry on the credit report.
Okay.
Oh, okay. That's good to know.
Yeah.
hear that soft pull, no inquiry. You hear that?
Yep. So until they actually go under contract, we don't have to do a hard inquiry on their credit report. We do a
Okay,
soft pull.
good.
It's huge. So it doesn't even show up. Now, I will say this. We try to get our clients to underwrite their loans ahead of time in the beginning of this process.
Oh, good.
So that's not just a pre-approved loan, but it's actually an underwritten loan. I think that goes, it goes a long way when you're negotiating, and I can say to the listing agent, hey, this client's actually been underwritten.
And what does that mean exactly? Just for people
I submit
listening?
it just
like underwriting, like if you're approved versus pre-approved, like what's that difference?
How about let's start like really, ABC type. What is an underwriter? Who is that?
I love that question.
Who is the undertaker?
Because that's always the one that's giving us the issues. The underwriter said this. The underwriter said that. I'm like, who the hell is this underwriter?
The underwriter is the decision maker, right? They're the decision
Just like
maker.
it's like, do you know them personally? Can you call them, or are they just some like ghost?
I
I
can
feel
call
like
them.
they're talked about as like there's some ghost. In
You know
the
what? There
background.
was a time, and some mortgage companies are set up that way, where the loan officer can't call the underwriters. They're behind lock and key, and you don't get to communicate with them. That is not the way it is here.
Okay.
I just had drinks with a couple of our underwriters.
Good to know.
a couple of
Okay.
weeks ago.
Yeah. So
last
who is
week.
the notorious underwriter? What do they do? And
Their job is to review what I've already reviewed, which is income, assets, and credit, and make sure that the client actually qualifies for the loan.
so it's just like another layer of a like verification.
They're
Almost.
kinda
They're
like-
kind of like the one that stamps the approval for
Well, and I want to
That's
say like
exactly
they're the super detective, right? Like you guys are the detective, and then like they're the super detective because they want to question everything.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you get an approval on the first go around, that's a shocker.
Yeah.
Like I feel like the underwriters need to justify their jobs by asking some questions.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what is
Even though
this
you're like,
deposit on, this date or anything? Like you're under a magnifying glass in that sense,
I'm like,
right?
dude, that's a super qualified client. You don't need to ask any questions here. This one's perfect.
I love that. Hear that? We got some pull there. So basically being pre-approved versus approved, they go through the underwriting process, and that's where it makes it more official and
there's
legit.
a difference between pre-approved and pre-qualified, right?
Yeah,
And we
yeah.
always we being us realtors always screw that up.
Yeah.
We say everybody's pre-approved.
Yeah. What is
right?
the difference?
But there's not.
It's a great question. That's a really good question. Pre-qualified, I call that back in the napkin math. Like, yep.
This is what I
What's your
make. This is what-
income? What
But
do you have
isn't
car
it-
payments? What are your student loan payments? Blah blah blah.
Why
Well, this
does
is about what you
pre-qualified
qualify
almost
for.
sounds like more official than pre-approved.
But I will say, aren't
never guessed that.
most people pre-qualified and not pre-approved? Or am I messing that up?
Ooh, not with me or
Okay.
Well, you
anybody
put
from
that.
our
So, like, what if you
institution.
got a client that was like, wanted to do this, napkin thing, and wants to just tell you and take their word for it, and they want to, submit an offer on something, but they don't want to go through the whole process. They want to get pre-qualified. Would you write anything up for that or no?
No.
I wonder, do lenders?
I
thought that
again.
I don't know.
I don't know this. I'm not doing this every day. Meaning the mortgage. I'm not a mortgage
Right.
person. But I just remember something back in the day about pre-qualifications versus pre-approvals. Maybe I was on the
Okay.
listing side.
See, I
and
didn't
saw
know
something.
that.
I mean,
that was the
I
difference.
can write a letter that says
Based on what I'm
inquired
told.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And without a credit check.
Oh,
Without a credit
wow.
check and based on what I've been given, you appear to qualify for.
Okay.
I mean, I can give you that letter, absolutely.
Yeah. Are those the only two options? Pre-qualification, pre-approval,
And then underwritten.
and then underwritten.
And that's what I'm referencing. We're going to do a hard credit inquiry
Okay.
when we underwrite. So we like to underwrite right out of the gate instead of just a pre-approval. So
Yeah.
so pre-qual, back of the napkin math. Number two, pre-approval, we actually pull credit and we review assets, income, and credit. underwriting is we take that documentation and submit it to the actual decision maker, the underwriter, the person behind lock and key, the one that gives us, they give us homework to do. Go find out about that and that. But that's an official approval, and it's as close to a cash offer as you can get.
Wow. Okay.
Which is why I really encourage people to get the underwritten loan, because in a competitive market, what is going to distinguish your offer from another offer? Well, this one is pretty much, it's only subject to appraisal and title.
Appraisal, yeah.
What now I'm back to Kelly's questions. I'm going back formal, but I was like, this actually ties in really well. The most common factors that make or break a pre-approval. Like, what are some ones? I mean,
I've heard before, car payments can be crazy. Like someone if you have, you're living at home, whatever, you get this nice new car and you go and get, pre-approved. And what if you have like a $900 car payment?
100%.
Like that is going to be a huge dent in your pre-approval. And the reason that I'm saying that is because I have a client right now and he's living at home, everything. And I was kind of shocked to hear what he was pre-approved for, like just knowing him like I do, but he's kind of got all these fun toys and he's got his nice truck and his his big like he's got a lot of things and I'm like, well, that makes sense.
Yep. So now he probably qualifies for less because he's taken on all this debt to have fun toys, which I get. That's his trade-off.
Right. I mean, yeah, to each their own, but it's just crazy to me that, like, I guarantee you that people who are in their 20s that are going to buy that nice car, they think, oh, yeah, I can afford this $900 payment a month because of my situation currently. But 3 years later, when you go to buy a house, you don't realize how much that affected you.
Yeah, it's huge, right? I mean, I'm literally asking people when I do the back of the napkin math, which most people want to go right to pre-approval, but on occasion someone says, can I just get pre-qualified? Can you just give me a ballpark? And that's when I do the back of the napkin math. And what I ask them is, what is your car payment? Do you have a second car payment? What are your student loans? What are the payments on those? What are your average balances on your credit cards? I need to know those monthly payments because they directly impact how much they can qualify for.
Wow.
Kelly's next question.
Really singling me out here.
How do you handle unrealistic clients who think they can afford more than they can?
That will they ever push back?
Because again, I feel like that ties in. Yeah.
This is probably geared towards the client that is like, I think I'm good at the 700 mark. Like, what do you like? They almost say at first.
See even what happening in these multiple offer situations, or like you said, the realtor pushing them to spend more, which is sad. I would never do that. But how do you handle that? I
let the math tell them the story and the answer. I learned a long time ago that it's not fun to say no. A long time ago, I don't want to ever have to say no to a client. Like, you can't qualify for that, and I don't. And so I learned how to not have to do that. And so,
when you mean.
You just say like this is the
you're
facts.
Saying like when you're already under contract and the loan.
Even when it's pre-approval and they're like, I really want to go spend. We can't find anything that's we've been looking online and we really don't feel like we can make it work for the house that's $500,000. We want to go to $700,000. And I look at their qualifications and they really don't qualify. I don't ever tell them you don't qualify. I never say those words unless they point blank ask me that. But instead, what I do is I show them the math. Right? And I back into it and I ask them, hey, what are you comfortable with paying? I mean, given your budget, what can you afford to spend monthly? They end up self-regulating.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I'm telling you, I just show them all the numbers and I ask them what they're comfortable with, what fits their budget, and they end up readjusting themselves without me ever having to tell them.
Okay. Go ahead.
If I have to actually get to the nuts and bolts of why, then I say, well, our industry has these things called debt ratios, which basically is a comparison of your income to your debt. And these are the caps. And if you buy a place for $700,000, this is what your debt ratio is, and this is what the industry allows.
Okay, so you blame
I never said no.
Blame
Do
on
you
the industry,
ever
right.
get people where you're like, you should be able to afford? Kind of like to Kelly's point, you should be able to afford more. But
are you ever
But your
saying,
spending habits are so bad. And like, do you ever feel like you have to like lecture them?
Yeah, because if they're like, I want a $700,000 house, but I have this, this, and this. Like, do you ever say, well, you can get there if blank?
100%. I call that a roadmap. I give them a roadmap on what it's going to take to get to where they want to be. So if they can't qualify for $700,000 because they have too many toys or whatever, I tell them that, like, okay, look, if you just, if you didn't have this payment, this is what your debt ratio looks like, and now it works, or or whatever. So I definitely give them the roadmap on what it's going to take to accomplish what they're asking for.
Yeah.
but I don't ever have to tell them no.
Okay.
And yes, I would love to be able to just say, dude, what are you thinking? I have a physician. I pre-approved her, and she has a massive car payment and some other stuff.
What's a massive car payment?
$1,500.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like,
it's higher than the mortgage on our
and this
rental
other
house.
debt. And she's like, oh, but I can afford, this monthly payment. By the way, doctors are the worst. They're financing. Their knowledge of finance is not as good as the average person.
Yeah, my
I would
husband
say.
always says they're really bad business people.
Yeah. So anyway, she spends a lot and she can't understand. And then anyway, so I'm like, look, if you didn't have that payment, you could actually afford this. And she's like, I'm like, yeah, could you pay off that $100,000 loan you have?
Yeah. I know, that's crazy.
I don't say that.
What?
I let the math do the talking.
I'm going rogue again. If you, in the 11th hour, like when things have been like close to closing, let's just say, what are some of the memorable things or reasons that people have not gotten clear to close or been able to buy the house?
Oh gosh, the worst
I mean,
nightmare.
that is,
There's nothing worse.
Yeah, there's nothing worse.
Okay, so this week alone, I had a client tell me, and he's a repeat customer, and he should know better. We got pinged with a credit inquiry for a car loan.
Come on. And when are they
Took
closing?
out a car loan. He's closing on
Stop
the
it.
18th.
And were you like, dude?
I'm like, what's the deal? Did you take out a car loan? And he goes, yeah. I go, really? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. What's the payment? You got to get me all of your paperwork, and now we got to go back through underwriting and make sure you still qualify. And your debt ratio is currently 35%, and I can only go up to 45. So I hope that the payment is within that wiggle room.
And wasn't.
No.
I'm waiting for the paperwork.
Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Did you say, like, did he know not to do that? Like, what was?
He's a very confident guy and didn't
In
really
one ear,
care.
out the other?
Yeah, didn't really care.
Didn't care. I mean, how do you not care? You're closing at 8. Like, there's at some point the ego needs to be like, okay, I just literally can't do this. Like, it's like black and white.
If somebody thinks though that they're you know what, don't stink, they're gonna be like, I got all the money, I'm fine. Yeah.
Well, here's another one that happened, and I talk about this example all the time. So I have a whole list of like do's and don'ts. These are the things I do want you to do, please, to protect your pre-approval. And here are the things that you don't want to do, because if you do them, you're going to sabotage yourself for this pre-approval and you may not get a loan. So I literally have a list of them, and I go through them one by one with each of them. One of them is do not deposit any cash into your bank account. The only deposits going into your bank account should be your payroll. And if it's something other than payroll, my underwriters are going to ask about it. And so I had a client, once again, this is a repeat client, and she didn't take the time to go through that with me the second time around, and she forgot. 10 days before closing, she pulled $30,000 out of a safe deposit box and put it in her bank account.
What?
So cash is
Why?
not
Like, just for.
We'd already documented the down payment, and she wanted to not deplete all of her cash, so she took cash and put it in the bank.
Oh God.
And how did that shake out?
That didn't work very well. So the underwriter got pinged because of this large deposit, and we had to ask her about it, and she couldn't document it. It was this close to not closing, but we were able to make it work because we were able to document all the rest of her money, and there was enough there. Honestly, I don't know how that thing closed. It closed, but I thought that was a dead deal for sure.
Oh my gosh. And that's something you
postponed
wouldn't
things.
even think about.
Right.
But that's why I will say, and I've had a client like this and they're at the forefront of my mind. It's amazing that you can sit there and go through all these things. You can say them out loud. You can send them a little cheat sheet on the do's and don'ts. And it's some clients literally.
They don't care.
In one ear, out the other. And it is amazing. You're like, wait a minute, we talked about that. And they're like, no, we didn't. And I'm like, yes, we did. You're crazy.
I think people.
You know?
I think this
Yeah.
process is so overwhelming sometimes for
Yeah.
customers that they're thinking about their next question that they had written down or whatever, and they're not really listening to the answer or what you just told them.
Yeah. I can see
Yeah,
that for
and
sure.
this is going to sound, and honestly, I'm guilty of this too, so I'm not throwing shade, but I'm just going to say that I think in our society now, we have so little accountability held to us. We're so used to hand holding and people like saying like, I sent you an email, make sure you read,
I
make sure you read
know.
that we
We
just
also create those monsters sometimes.
that's what I'm saying.
I mean, I
it's-
know I do. I'm guilty of hand holding.
I'm guilty of it. I'm even guilty of not paying attention close enough, because you're waiting on somebody to call you and say, hey, you have to do this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And again, so I think that's one of the biggest problems is it's like our society not holding people accountable.
Right.
We're really fast paced. This society is fast paced.
Yes.
And people are thinking about the next move without listening. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What's the craziest thing you've seen on a loan application? Did we talk about that one?
Do you seriously want the truth about
Yes.
it? Okay, there's two of them.
What do you mean on the loan application?
Well,
Well, I guess like the craziest thing that's ever.
craziest applicant or
yeah.
weird situation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Tell me.
Do you have editing capability?
We don't need it here. This is an edit free podcast.
We don't like to edit.
All right.
We like to. Kelly's modeling our life after Joe Rogan.
That's right.
I like it. All right. Well, there's two.
All right, make sure the audience can hear you.
Two that come to mind in particular. The first one is a dancer at VIPs in Chicago.
Okay.
Ooh.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And how does she claim that cash? How is she showing that?
Well, it is cash, and that was back in the day when you could do those loans where you didn't have to document the income because
Okay.
her money was cash, and she had a large down payment because she had saved literally a bunch of cash.
Wait a minute. Are strippers not allowed to get pre-approved?
Oh, she got pre-approved. I
But what
pre-approved
about
her.
now?
Like,
And she was in her 40s.
What about like today? Is
She
there
was in her
something
40s
different?
buying her first place.
Hell yeah, go girl.
40s and on the table or whatever.
On the pole.
wow. Okay.
Hey, more power to her.
First of all, how did you get that client?
I don't even remember at this point.
Late Friday night somewhere. Slide your business card right up on the table.
I'm ashamed.
Oh my God.
So what about that today? Like, yeah, what if so? I mean, because it's not talking. I mean,
it's
a legal job. It's just all cash.
Mm-hmm.
So is their best bet having like a huge hefty down payment and then getting approved for financing a smaller amount?
Yeah, so they have loans called bank statement loans, and they're more for like self-employed individuals.
Yeah.
You still have to show the cash flow coming in, but you have to have a large down payment. You have to have really good credit.
Do some lenders not do bank statement loans?
Correct.
Okay, so that's a perk.
Yeah.
If you're a stripper.
Call Mike. What's the other one?
There's two other ones, and one of them was, this is weird, but this dude, he applies. I'm meeting with him in person, and he kept excusing himself from the conversation. And he would pick up his phone and start talking to his customers, and he was a doctor, supposedly, and he sold penis enlargers.
Wow.
I didn't know that was
my
a thing.
God,
That is hilarious.
Absolutely bizarre. Absolutely
Okay.
bizarre. And it was a legit buyer. And this real estate agent worked with this guy to sell him several properties. So evidently business was good.
I'm sure it was good.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot
I
of
never
people out
closed
there.
on that loan. I don't know what happened with that guy. That was the most bizarre thing I'd ever
That
heard.
is so funny. The different types of people that we come across, I tell you.
And he was literally asking these people who were calling him questions about their genitalia while I'm in the room.
Come on.
Measurements and all these things. And I was like, this is so weird. Like, what the where am I? Like,
Oh my gosh.
That's kind of amazing.
okay, then the third one that
If it's worse than that, I mean.
so the third one was more of a closing scenario where it was a divorce situation.
Oh.
And so there's a man and his ex-wife, and he was being very frugal, and she was sitting quietly. They had already been divorced. They were selling their marital property, and their attorney was the husband's brother, and he was doing them a favor. Anytime you have an attorney that's not a regularly practicing real estate attorney, and I call it the 3 R's, you got to be a residential real estate attorney who does it routinely.
Yep.
If you
Oh
don't
my
have
gosh,
those
that's-
three things,
The 3 R's.
Yep, that is a good thing. PSA, everyone.
residential
Residential.
real estate routinely. If they don't have those three, please do not hire that attorney.
Yep.
Anyway,
out to
they had
Jason.
one that didn't meet those three requirements, this guy and his ex-wife. And then I had my sweet first-time buyer couple and their attorney, who was a seasoned attorney. And what happened was, like they were getting ready to move in. They did their final walkthrough, and there was a big stain on the floor, and they had been covering it up with a plant or something. So they wanted a $300 credit at closing. Like, this is like a $320,000 deal or whatever. Anyway, the guy refused to give him a credit at closing, right? The stingy seller, he was a jerk. And this closing went on and on. All of a sudden, the two attorneys, they stand up, they start yelling at each other. And I remember the attorneys' names. I won't give you names. And one attorney says to the other attorney, "You need to go down the hall and talk to the attorney for the title company and learn some real estate 101, you dumbass." And I was like, they started blowing up. And then in the corner, the ex-wife who had been quiet the whole time, she instantly, like, after listening to all this, erupts. And she goes, "You cheap son of a bitch. That's why I divorced you in the first place." She pulls out her checkbook, writes a check for $300, pushes it across the table to my buyers and says, I want this to be done. And so it's like this whole big tornado.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like straight out of a movie.
It was incredible. And then I didn't go to another closing for like 10 years.
Really? I mean,
we had a company like Cubs game that day, and I missed it to go to this closing. And I vowed I'm never doing that.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And we are useless at closings. Like
I know.
Useless.
We're just bodies.
I know. I started going to them again a little bit when schedule allows, but you just sit there.
I know. And it's the worst when they're like little cubicle office spaces too, and it's so tight in there. I go when I can, but yeah, no, it's not that necessary. But that is so crazy. Talk about entertainment.
It was.
I'm glad that they got the $300.
I felt bad for them. Like, that's their first purchase of a home, and they're like, wow, this is a circus.
Oh, I know. Can you imagine? And like the sellers aren't even usually there.
Yeah.
So like that's another thing.
Yep.
Okay, one question I really wanted to ask, just for entertainment purposes also. If lenders could complain, what would you guys complain about?
And that's because you're on realtor therapy. So
right.
This is your time.
This is your time to get anything out there in the open that you know.
I would say probably our number one complaint is getting beat up over interest rates against an online lender.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Well, and I mean, and does it kind
feel
of
bad for me?
Does it kind of suck
do.
too? Because like you as a buyer, you can't get locked into a rate until you have a contract, correct? So don't you hate it when people call you and they're like, "Well, what's your interest rate?"
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you're going to call around all these people and they could easily get, fool you a little bit. And then once you go under contract, then call me. And then that'd be a proper way to more like shop rates, right?
Yep.
Well, and I always tell people, interest rates are like airline tickets. You shop for an airline ticket all on the same day between, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't call you one week and then call somebody else another week because it depends on what's going on that day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's a great way to think of it. I like that. I'm going to use that.
You're welcome to use it.
But that's probably a frustrating thing when people are like, oh, I'm interviewing lenders or I'm shopping rates. And it's like, you can't really tell them that. And, so why do these online lenders, like, what is it about? Like, why are they?
Zero customer service.
Yeah, right.
Zero customer service. There's no humans to pay for. Their call centers and stuff like that.
Oh, who wants to deal with that on top of?
I had one of those only once that I can literally remember. And it was a nightmare. It was scary. It was just scary. And I always tell people in those situations, like I always say, don't call 1-800-CHASE. If you're going to tell me that your brother-in-law works for Chase or something like that, okay, by all means, knock yourself out. But do not wander into a bank and go meet with somebody because that could be the very first time that person's ever done a loan.
Right.
And if you have any kind of moving parts, you have to remember the seller can cancel on you if you don't maintain your contract to what it's supposed to be. So if you're late and if you're going to make that seller late on their purchase because of you, there are so many dominoes that can go wrong if you don't close on time. You don't want to go through that hell of an experience.
Right. And not having a point of contact either, like that would be awful. You know how many times that, even on the other side, I call the lender. I need a point of contact for a lender. I feel like that when you don't have that, it makes for a nightmare.
We pick up the phone after hours, We'll talk to you at 8 p.m. if we need to
talk
about a deal.
You know what?
We work when you work.
Those are the times that
you're
needed.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's, yeah.
I want to talk about appraisals too quick.
Go ahead.
Okay, so appraisals, I just want to know your opinion on them because I don't even know how I feel about them because part of me feels like, okay, it's nothing literally short of an opinion. It's that appraiser that goes out there. And I remember hearing this one time on a podcast and they were like, the appraiser could have, stepped in dog poo that day and it pissed him off. And that could have, just maybe made that sway of $5,000 or something. Like how airtight is the appraisal process? And do you feel like there is room for error? Do you feel like that it is a matter of opinion? And do you feel like that, because there's also certain lenders I've talked to that'll be like, oh, you don't have to worry about our appraisal like coming in low.
Yeah,
and it's like, how are you able to vouch for that? That makes me feel like there's a lot of room for error there.
Yeah, I mean, it is one person's opinion. Think about it. Like if you ask 10 different real estate agents about the value of a property, you might get 10 different numbers, right?
Right.
When you guys are doing your analysis before you go into a listing presentation, think about how many times each person has a different number. It's the same way with an appraiser. I mean, there's sort of an art, not really a science. I mean, they're looking at all this data and then they're making their own judgments based on the data that they have, and they have to fit it within a certain like window, I guess you could call it. So yeah, there's a little bit of judgment error that can happen for sure. Now, here's how I try to avoid it. We handpick the people that go on our appraisal panel, and that means we pick people who we think genuinely care and give us the time and know what they're doing. Right, but like good people that know what they're doing, and they're going to. And if they make a mistake, they'll own it, and they'll call us if there's something wrong, like, hey, look, this doesn't make sense. You guys, am I missing something here? That's really valuable.
Right.
Oh, that's huge, actually.
That is huge. Yeah, because I always wonder with that. Now, and if an appraisal comes back, let's say an appraisal comes back super low, and everyone agrees, like, it came back low. And is it as easy just to say, like, let's just order a new one? Because, like, do they have access that there was a previous, low appraisal in the past? Like, will the next appraiser have access to that?
Well, the first appraiser, the second appraiser will not have access to the first appraiser unless it's a government loan.
Like
right?
FHA
So if it's an
or
FHA
VA.
or a VA, yes, they'll see that.
Okay.
But not on a conventional loan. They won't necessarily see that there was another appraisal done or no. But there is a process we have to go through in order to order another appraisal.
Right, like you can't just willy-nilly just be like, I'll keep on doing this until it sticks.
Right. I'm going to order 5 appraisals
Right.
or endless appraisals until I get the answer I want. Doesn't work that way. So
There has to be like a major error, right?
you have to actually prove with data that the comparables that the original appraiser used are inferior to other comparables that are out there.
Okay.
So you have to provide actual data.
So provide the ones that we think should be used,
Yep.
and basically attest to
Like he picked the wrong ones.
like-
These are the ones
Yep.
they should
yes,
use.
like protest the ones that they use, and then
Because I mean, that did happen to me once where it was new construction I was selling, and the appraiser used it was all existing homes that he used, and it was like, okay, how do you.
Yeah.
new construction can probably be tough.
Well, if you're in an area where there's not a lot new,
Right.
it's tough.
That probably is the highest level of complication for an appraisal is new construction.
Yeah, like and I like Joshua's coming to mind. Like it's in a very well established neighborhood.
We did okay on Joshua.
Well, good, but that always made me wonder too, because I mean that's brand new in
Yeah,
a subdivision
that
with
could have been tricky.
right.
People are paying for upgrades, like they might buy a new construction. They're like, oh, hey, I want these added things into my home, but they don't necessarily add value overall.
Right.
They are important to that home buyer, but when they trick out a certain room or whatever, it adds cost, but it doesn't necessarily add value compared to all the other homes that are in the neighborhood. Right?
That's why we always tell people, like, if you're going to sell soon and you're doing a full rehab, let us send you updated comps to see
Right.
what's your subdivision maxing out at, what's your area maxing out at, because don't go over that.
Yeah, you can. It's very easy to over improve for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have in my own house. But if I'm going to enjoy it,
Right.
there's another
See,
saying.
I feel like you bought at a time to where you had a lot of room to improve.
Oh, I had a lot of room to improve, but I went a little probably
Right.
overboard. But I always tell people there's 2 ways you can look at the home, right? Is like when you buy a car, you buy that car for enjoyment. The minute you
Right.
drive that car off the lot, you're like, okay, I know this isn't worth anything anymore.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you got to be prepared with certain situations with your house. Like, are you doing this for enjoyment or are you doing this for resale?
Right.
There's 2 different avenues.
Yeah, if you're over improving, you may not get that money back.
Right. 100%.
All right. Well,
Kelly?
anything else? I think
What
I
about
got
you?
out
Do
everything.
you want to leave us with any
Yeah.
words of wisdom?
Oh, no, I have no wisdom. But I'm just curious, do you feel fully geeked out for the day with
I
your
actually
mortgage
do.
talk?
When you were talking about those numbers, I was like, yeah, tell them.
I do get into the numbers. It is kind of fun.
I love it.
It is fun, and people don't have the time to study the data like that. us included. And so
Right.
it's great to have a lender that does and kind of can geek out like that. So I'm on geek board.
You know what? People feel my geek vibe when I'm talking to them. They can hear the tone of my voice when I'm like, oh, and this, especially when people are like buying investment properties. I'm like, oh my gosh, and this, and I get excited for them, and they can
I
feel
love
that
it.
vibe.
Okay,
you know what I
see?
mean? Like there is a vibe, there's a thing
There
there, right?
is.
And when they feel the energy from me, they're like, wow, this guy's legit. Like he really believes what he's telling me. I'm like, yeah, it's true. I feel that way.
Okay, that's
Well,
good.
good. It's
How
good
can
to-
people? I'm gonna pull Skinny Confidential. You
I don't listen to that,
Okay,
no.
shout out because I really love that podcast. But how can people find you, Mike? How can they contact you?
Oh, my website, Mike McNamara.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, Mike McNamara.
.net.
.net. Okay,
Yeah.
you got that, you guys?
Yeah.
That's how you find this man.
Right on. Right on.
We'll put it in the show notes.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, of
This is great.
course. This is
Love it.
great having you.
I love the
I
vibe.
know.
All right, guys.
I know.
Hope you enjoyed it. If you guys have any specific lender questions, let us know.
Okay, ciao, ciao for now.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. That's a wrap on Realtor Therapy with Steph and Cal.
If you loved what you heard, subscribe, leave a review, and follow us on social media.
Got a wild real estate story or a topic idea?
Drop it anonymously in the form in our show notes. We'd love to hear from you.
Until next time, keep hustling, stay sane, and remember,
We're all in this together.